There are lots of different ways to make tea-dyed paper. However, I'm going to show you my favourite method, which is to paint the tea onto the paper and then bake it in the oven for 2 to 3 minutes. This is a really quick way to tea-dye paper, and you end up with sheets of paper that have uneven colour with lots of lovely texture. For making tea-dyed paper, you'll need to use black tea. I buy cheap black tea bags, as there's no need to use expensive tea for dyeing the paper. To make the tea dye, I like to use 4 tea bags in 2 cups of boiling water. After you add the boiling water, let the tea bags steep for about 5 minutes until the water looks quite dark. The type of paper I like to use is 24-pound copy paper. This weight of paper is thicker than standard copy paper, and you can write on it without the ink bleeding through to the other side. For baking the paper, I use old cookie trays covered with aluminium foil. I use 2 small trays that hold 1 sheet of paper each. However, if you have a large oven, you could use larger trays to fit 2 sheets of paper. Once the tea has steeped, place a sheet of plastic on a flat surface and paint the paper with the tea. I like to use a wide foam brush, but you could really use any type of paintbrush. Give the upper side of the paper a good soaking, then turn it over and paint the underside as well. To turn the paper over, use both hands to lift the paper at the corners and then carefully flip it over. When lifting the paper, be very careful as it becomes fragile when it's wet and it tears easily. I like my tea stain to be a light to medium shade. To make a darker shade, simply add more tea bags to make the tea solution stronger. Or for a lighter shade, add less tea bags. Once the paper is painted, carefully lift it at the corners and place it on the cookie tray. Before placing the tray in the oven, you can add a few more dabs of tea here and there to make darker stains. Now the paper is ready to bake. I bake my paper at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 2 to 3 minutes. You may need to make a few test pages and adjust the heat and time settings depending on your oven. When baked, the paper should be completely dry and slightly crinkled. While the paper is baking in the oven, paint another set of papers. Then once the baked paper comes out, you can quickly put a new set in. Doing it this way, you can get quite a lot of paper painted and baked in a very short amount of time. If you have a printer that makes permanent prints, like a laser printer or an inkjet printer with water-resistant inks, you can even print designs and images onto the copy paper before you tea stain it. If you're not sure whether your printer makes permanent prints, check the printer manual or make a small test print. Allow it to dry, then dab it with water. If the ink runs, then you won't be able to pre-print your paper. However, if it doesn't run, then you can safely print designs and images before you paint the tea stain. Once the paper is printed, simply paint the tea stain on both sides of the paper, then bake in the oven. If you don't have a printer that makes permanent prints, you could get prints made at your local print shop on their laser printer. Once the paper is baked, you can see that the tea stain gives a lovely antique look to the printed pages. During the tea staining and the baking process, the paper tends to become slightly warped and uneven, and if you're planning to write on the pages, this can be a bit of a problem. However, you can easily flatten the pages to make them easier to write on or work with. To make the pages really flat, you can iron them. Use a hot iron with no steam and iron the page on both sides until it's flat. This makes a really flat page, which is perfect for writing, sketching, or drawing. Another way to flatten the pages is to use a book press. Book presses can be quite expensive though, So I made my own using 2 inexpensive wooden cutting boards and 4 bar clamps that I found in the dollar store. Simply stack the pages together between the 2 cutting boards, then attach a clamp to each side. After everything is clamped together, I like to leave the papers to sit overnight. Alternatively, you can also flatten the pages by stacking them together, then piling a heavy stack of magazines or books on top, and then leave them to sit overnight. Using either a book press or a stack of magazines will flatten the pages a little, but they will still be slightly distorted and wavy, and not as flat as when using an iron. There's no right or wrong way to flatten the pages, or you don't even have to flatten them at all. It's just a personal preference and also depends on what you're going to use them for.